The CPI report, Child Protection in Iowa, brought to you by Vocal, Victims of Child Abuse Laws. You can watch our program on Mediacom Channel 15 on Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock. Again, you can see it on Wednesday evening at 9:30. You can email us at vocaliwoa@mchsi.com, or we take telephone calls from parents and grandparents. My number is 515-276-3956, and John's telephone number, also in Des Moines, 515-282-2672. My name is Don Burgmaier, and with me at the controls is my co-host,
John Harvey, and welcome to the CPI report. CPI, that stands for Child Protection in Iowa. And within those boundaries are a couple of pursuits that we have. Number one is to influence public policy as it relates to child protection issues. And secondly, we like to roll up our sleeves and work one-on-one with families who are having difficulties with the Department of Human Services. And we use this program to help achieve both of those ends in educating folks as to what to do when there comes a knock at your door. We'll be doing a little bit of talking about that today on today's program, outlining some of the things that are in something called the appeal process. There is a General Assembly coming up in January, and we need to prepare well in advance of that. One thing that you might want to do is to check in to the governor's office from time to time to see if they have a budget hearing set up. We haven't learned yet when that budget hearing is to take place, but they do have one each year as the projections of income and the requests for expenditures come into a budget hearing that is open to the public. And I've had my cameras down there from time to time. We used to do a lot more of that than we have in the past years. But you might want to check in to see when that budget hearing takes place. And mainly if you have one or two comments about the budget, then you can go on and use the rest of your 5 minutes to talk directly to the governor and to other officials who have a good deal to say about how our state government is run. There are a lot of concerns with respect to the budget as it stands right now. It looks as though expenditures are exceeding income, and they're always looking for newer and better ways of spending your tax dollar. Sometimes spending that tax dollar isn't quite as important as or overextending ourselves on expenditures wouldn't be quite so bad if what they were accomplishing was really worthwhile or necessary. It doesn't seem, however, that what we're finding in child protection programs, that the programs that we're talking about are really all that necessary. I'd like to see a full-scale project done in which a committee of citizens investigates the Department of Human Services and comes up with its own recommendations. That would then, that effort should not have government officials, should not have contractors, should not have people on the main membership of the program who profit from the operation of the Department of Human Services. I know one state representative said that when he came into office many years ago, that he was really surprised by the number of lobbyists there were from the DHS. Now, that isn't just from the DHS administrative office. That's from efforts, money that flows through the hands of DHS. He said there were 32 lobbyists that came to him, lobbying their ideas and so forth about how to spend more and more and more money. I think it behooves us to watch out when people have great things to offer us, programs to offer us, and they want to tax us in order to do those programs. I think that with a financial audit of the Department of Human Services, followed by a performance audit of the Department of Human Services, then we could lay some groundwork for doing some other things, like looking into the various programs to see which ones can be improved, which ones can be cut back, and which ones can be eliminated. If we were to do that, I think we could concentrate on the things that have to be done, must be done, should be done, and should be fully supported, and we can get rid of those programs that make little or no sense whatsoever. In fact, many of the programs, Don, that I've looked into are actually counterproductive. When you see Department of Human Services social workers going in and tearing apart families, how does it help to restore a family if you, first of all, tear it apart? And one thing that is amazing to me is the fact that of all of the cases that I've looked into, and I'm willing to consider other inputs here, of all the cases I've looked into, I haven't found any case where a DHS intervention did anybody any good. Now, if we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars in protecting children, and we're setting up programs to keep families together, but we can't see any of the fruits of that labor and expenditure, then I think that we've got an accountability problem, do we not? Don?
You mentioned we don't see the fruits of the labor. I do. We've been watching this for 20 years, and over the years, we do see the fruits of the labor. The fruits of the DHS labor is termination of parenting rights, John.
Yes, but I wouldn't call that very fruitful in a society that honors families, that honor grandparents, and a society that honors children. To be torn asunder from all of their moorings, and you've even heard kids that have been torn away from parents and even had their names changed of all things. How evil can it be to cause a person to lose his identity? We talk about identity theft. Isn't it identity theft when the Department of Human Services snatches a child, puts that child in foster care, changes that child's name so that they lose their very identity? A name is an identity, and DHS is involved, in my way of thinking, in identity theft. Should we support from our General Assembly, from our state treasurers, money to accomplish what I believe to be antisocial behavior? Certainly not productive behavior. It's counterproductive behavior, and we're paying for it. I think that the governor, if you go to his office, you probably should talk to him about counterproductive things. You know, one thing that is troubling me a whole lot is how the welfare system, having so much influence over whether or not your children are removed from your home, can use that influence to say, Mother, you've got to divorce your husband, and we'll make sure you get to keep the kids. Or, Mother, file a no-contact order on that husband of yours so he can't see the kids. And I even heard one last week where it said, Mother, you don't have to give your ex visitation rights except that they be supervised. Well, where in the world do they get off on getting into, grabbing judicial authority? It's only an officer of the court, it's only the judge of the court who can say, remove this child or place this child under visitation, under supervision. Only a judge can do that. Where do they get off on saying that a social worker can step across those boundaries? Now, what are the essential principles here? Well, the social worker is part of the executive branch of government. They carry out the orders, the laws that are established by the legislative branch. A social worker is not a judge. A social worker cannot carry out judicial responsibilities. A social worker must obey the laws established by the legislature and is bound by the orders of the court. The social worker is not to play judge, either in real life or on television. Well, so we're seeing an extension of the authority, the illegal extension of the authority of a social worker. Be very cautious, because even the attorneys are saying to their clients, you do everything the DHS asks you to do, and we can help you get your kids back, or we can prevent them from taking them from your home.
And you'll get your kids back in 3 months.
Right. Well, and that can go on and on. And in the cases that I've heard most recently, they can say to you, either you do this, mother. They usually talk to the mothers on these, in these cases. But they're not adverse to talking to fathers if they think they can mess up the family by talking to fathers or grandfathers or anyone else. But the hooker is this: or will take your children away from you. Well, that has a tendency to unnerve somebody, to have a government official come into your house and say, do this or do this or do this, or or jump through this hoop, or we'll take your children away from you. What right does a person in the healing arts, and by the way, social workers consider themselves to be healers. They're the ones that can patch up wounds. They're the ones that can put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Can't they, Don?
That's what they say.
Okay. They consider themselves to be in the healing arts. Well, one of the premises of the healing arts is to say, first, do no harm. Doctors wash their hands because they are obeying that principle. They do a lot of other things because they're obeying that principle. First, do no harm. Well, the social worker, that's the first thing they do, is to consider what kind of harm. Did you have a comment there, Don?
Yeah, I had a comment. I think a lot of social workers do have a heart. They look at this job. They take on this job of helping families. But for some reason, when they get into the job, they find out the requirements are totally different than what they thought they were getting into in the first place. And the end result, they're forced to lie on the witness stand, do everything contrary to what they thought would be helping the parents. And so the end result, even though a lot of things they smooth talk and say how nice it is, and the parent, if you'll do this certain thing, or you in 3 months you'll get your child back, all it is just building up toward termination of parenting rights.
Sure. Well, I've lined up some rather serious things where the person from the executive branch of government, which is DHS, and by the way, our audience should know something about the three branches of government. A unique way of checks and balances so that you don't have one segment of government running the whole thing without someone else looking over their shoulder. But when you have a social worker playing judge, you disturb that that whole principle of the branches of separation. They call it separation of powers. And a social worker who tells a parent to put the husband on supervised visitation is not a righteous social worker. She's not, I should say he or she is not following the law. They have no authority whatsoever to tell a father, get out of the house and stay out until we finish this investigation, or I'll take your children away. Well, the ordinary citizen doesn't know that the social worker cannot take the children away. And in some cases, I've simply said to parents, tell me the chapter and verse that says that you can take away my children simply because I don't file a no-contact order, or I don't divorce my spouse, or I don't do whatever other little nonsensical thing you have set up for me to do. Tell me where you find that in your statutes.
But is that in writing, John? Does the social worker put this all in writing and let the courts and everybody else know that she's said this to the parent?
That's, we had a mother who was being besieged by the Department of Human Services. We simply told the mother, if you have questions beyond what I've already answered, you put your questions in writing, and if they're relevant questions, I'll respond to them in writing. And that's the way our audience should view the Department of Human Services. They can sweet talk almost anybody into saying anything they want you to say. And the more they can get you to talk, the worse off you are. We gave you a little lesson on that. Don't talk to the police. You never can win by trying your case before a policeman. And never talk to a social worker. You'll never be able to explain all of the things that he or she has in store for you by simply chattering and telling about your past and how you were raised and what you thought about your parents and so forth. Well, in a little bit, we'll be getting to that area where we're talking about venues and the different areas and what you should be thinking about if you appeal your case before the Department of Human Services. I talked about that separation of powers. One of the toughest areas that we have to deal with, even though we deal with primarily with executive branch problems here with DHS, one of the more difficult ones that we have to deal with, because we're not attorneys and we can't step in the courtroom, we can't prepare documents for people, then we have we can't argue a case before the bar, is the judicial system. And the judicial system now is in real trouble. Would you like to talk to somebody who is a troublemaker in the judicial system? This is a fellow who is the judge of judges. This is a fellow who wants to see reform in that one branch of government called the judicial system, the branch of government that is to have some say about how the other two branches of government are operating. Unfortunately, that judicial branch has handed over a lot of its so-called authority to the Department of Human Services, and the Department of Human Services runs with it. I heard of one judge who said to a social worker when she called him in the middle of the night, he said, well, you go ahead and do whatever you want to, and I'll cover you with the paperwork in the morning. Well, you see what that does is it puts the judicial branch into the hands of the social worker. And you know what the social worker can certainly do with more authority than they should have. Well, I want to introduce you to someone who has a love for reform. This is Terrance Walker.
Thanks a lot, John. And I want to redefine my role in the whole reform process. I'm a solution maker, not a troublemaker. I think the real troublemakers are the judges that are doing as you say, covering the butts of the bureaucrats and the people that are in power or the people that have authority or have money or influence. Those are the real troublemakers in the judiciary. I'm actually a solution maker. I
like that.
redefine that for you.
Should I go back over the introduction?
No. I don't think
Here now, the solution maker, Terrance Walker.
Appreciate it, John. But yeah, I think is really clear, and I made the analogy the past couple weeks of one guy that I think is kind of on point for what I'm discussing that happens within the judicial spectrum. One guy in the NBA, referee named Tim Donaghy. He was found guilty of fixing the basketball games, and I guess he was betting on them. Now, if we compare what a referee is, referee basically is the same thing in the judicial spectrum. Referee does the same thing that a judge does. A referee calls the fouls. They determines what's fair. They make sure that the game is played by rules. Now, when we talk about the judiciary, that's basically what a judge is a referee. They determine the rules. They call the fouls, and they're supposed to do it even-handedly. Now, when you have a case where a social worker is basically covered by the judge, and the judge is basically saying, well, whatever you do, I'll justify it in the case, that's a clear case of case fixing. And this is the kind of thing that goes on all the time. And this is the main problem with the judiciary. And this is why we have so many problems with the judiciary, and that's why we have so many groups that are coming out now against the judiciary and calling for reform. And those calls, I guess, I don't know if they're falling on deaf ears, but it's kind of hard to reform a system that is protected by the same industry that they're in. And when you're trying to reform the system, and the people that make the rules for the system are in the same industry, you're going up a hill. It's an uphill battle. So this is the problem that we have in reforming the judiciary. It's just like the case in South Dakota when they were trying to reform the judiciary in South Dakota, Judicial Accountability Initiative law, when they were trying to implement that, and they passed a resolution on the ballot to get that put into a law or have it put on the ballot to be voted on. The same people in the industry who control the whole game, they misdefined the Judicial Accountability Law and put it on the ballot as something that was completely different than what it was initially labeled as. So when the people came time to vote for it, this happened 2 years ago, they basically said, well, no, we're not going to vote for it. Well, of course they're not going to vote for it when they're claiming that it is going to put people, school board members in jail and all this other stuff. This law was clearly limited to judges, but this is the game that's played. But I would like to point on a specific topic and make another analogy to what goes on in the judiciary. Now, just imagine if you were to go to get a driver's license, and you're about 35 or so, and of driving age, clearly within the rules, and had good vision, passed the test, but the people at the driver's license place said, well, you can't have a license. And you say, well, why? and they hand you a piece of paper that says what's on the sheet. And you read the sheet, and the sheet says anybody that can't see or doesn't pass the test doesn't get the license. And you're like, well, what does this have to do with anything? And they tell you to read the sheet, and they say if you don't like the decision, you can appeal. Now, the average person out there would be highly upset. Now, just imagine another scenario. Say you have a child, and you want to register them in public school, another government entity, and they were of age, they were middle school age, and you took them to a middle school. They had passed the previous grade. They met all the requirements, and according to the rules. And yet, when you went to register that child for that school, they said, well, I'm sorry, sir, but we can't put them in the school. And you're like, well, why? He's qualified. We live in the district, and what's the reason why? And they hand you a piece of paper that says, children over 18 can't go to school. And you're like, well, my son's not over 18. Well, if you disagree with our decision, then you can appeal. Well, these two scenarios that I'm laying forth happen all the time in the judiciary. One prime example here that happened to me personally here a couple weeks ago was that I was given a ticket for not moving over, supposedly, to the left lane because emergency vehicles was stopped along the side of the right lane, on the right side of the road. Well, when I brought to the attention of the court a law here in Iowa which stated that if you slow down, you're supposed to stay in the right lane. Oh, well, that only applies if you're on a two-way street. And when I pointed out to the judge, I think the judge, what do we call him? Judge Deer in the headlights, the one down in Polk County. What he said, when I pointed out to him, it said clearly in the text of the law that it had different examples. It had one way, it had four-lane highway. I said, Judge, I mean, it doesn't make sense what you're saying. Well, our ruling is denied. So this is what happens in the court system here all the time. But because we have people in place and they're in an industry that is basically protects them, and there's no way to actually make real reforms within the system, we run into this uphill battle where we can't reform the system. But, you know, if a bunch of people, just imagine this, if a bunch of people went to the driver's license place and didn't get their license for no reason, or for a lane brain reason, or people tried to register their kids for school and they were school age and they lived in the district and they were qualified and they didn't get the kids in the school for lane brain reason, then I imagine people would be in an uproar. Well, people should be in an uproar about the judiciary because that's the same thing, same kind of scenario that's going on. So pay attention to the courts. I urge everyone out there to watch vigilantly. There's a good website, victimsoflaw.net. You see a lot of good stories on the judiciary and what goes on, and a lot of interesting stories. But, you know, you probably won't see a lot of reporting on it because a lot of the papers are scared to report on these kind of issues because, why? Because they can get sued. And when they get sued, who do they got to go in front of? Those same judges that they're reporting that they did something wrong. But I think we need to all take an example of Tim Donaghy of the NBA, the NBA referee that got sanctioned and put in jail 15 months. I think that's what we need to do a lot of these judges because they are definitely fixing cases, just like the guy, the deer in the headlights, is fixing the ticket case, in which I tried to present a legal argument. But anyway, go ahead. Did you have something to say, Don?
Yeah, I had a comment based on what you were saying, that I had a hearing about 5 years ago on the DHS issue, and the judge made a ruling, and then according to law, you have 10 days to file a motion to have the judge reconsider if you want him to do that. So I did. And the attorney of record on the other side responded back and said to the judge, throw out his claim. He didn't do it within 10 days. And the ruling with the file stamp on it, and I provided the paper with my file stamp on it showing when I had filed the reconsideration. And I did it within 7 days. And, you know, the judge threw me out based on what the attorney said. And then further, I appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court did the same thing.
Yeah, that's what goes on. There's a lot of case fixing going on, and that's what we really need to be in an uproar about. And these judicial qualifications commissions do not do anything about it, because a lot of times they say, well, you can just appeal, and this is not an avenue for addressing those type of grievances here. But this is what goes on, America, so be aware. Don't wait till you get to the courthouse and find out from a first-hand experience. It goes on all the time.
That's right.
Okay. You had a couple notes here.
Oh, yeah, I did wanted to highlight a couple of happenings or occurrences here in Iowa as far as the judiciary. The governor appointed on August 13th, he appointed Richard Doyle to the Court of Appeals, Iowa Court of Appeals, and I guess he went to Drake and graduated in '76, worked for about a year in the Attorney General's office, and has been in private practice ever since, and he's replacing Judge Zimmer, and I used to say your chances of justice are dimmer if you're going in front of Judge Zimmer. Well, let's hope that Judge Doyle can be loyal to the law. That's my little take on that.
Okay, we got maybe something underneath it. Well, that's not what you wanted. About the Iowa Code. Did you want to comment on that?
That's the move over provision. That's the one I was arguing.
Oh, okay. Iowa Code 321.323.
Yeah, I'll have some more on that. You know, we might even put that on. We might even have a full trial just to show people. You know, I'm not even arguing about the $50 fine or $100 fine. That doesn't make a difference. But you know, it's principles. Principles count, and we needed people out there to see what really goes on and transpires. Now, judges might act a little bit differently if they know the cameras are on them, but we're going to see.
Excellent.
We're going to see.
You know,
Thanks
you were
a lot.
talking there about the breadth of jurisdiction that these judges sometimes take. You know, when they want to establish jurisdiction, they can do it almost on voice command. When you have something that you want to get from that court, it's interesting that they know how to shed jurisdiction, and they can turn your case down for want of jurisdiction. There's all kinds of games that are now being played in this judicial system, and I think that we need to let these people know that they are adults, they are being held accountable, and there are no games. And I think sooner or later we're going to have to let our judges know this strictly.
But I would like to add, if it is a game, let the game be fair. You know, like I was making an analogy with the referee.
Right.
They are in essence a referee. Now, if they're going to follow the rules, let's follow the rules. Let's go by the rules even-handedly. Let's not call a foul on one person and then the other person, they get a free rein to do what they want, and you know, that's what goes on when you have case fixing. And that might be a little harsh terminology, but you know, that in reality, that's exactly what it is. It's case fixing or game fixing, like a referee. Instead of game fixing, case fixing.
You bet. Well, thank you, Terrance, for those comments about the judicial system. You see, if the judicial system is broken and needs reform, then we're not going to make much headway in anything that we're attempting to do in the executive branch of government. It seems as though if these three branches of government do not go together wisely, we're going to be forever in difficulty. Well, Don, we're going to be talking about um, things such as appeals in the Department of Human Services. Now, there's a completely different view of ways when we talk about appeals here. The appeals in the Department of Human Services are known as administrative appeals. They have nothing to do with real live judges. They have nothing to do with the judicial branch of government. They are simply a means by which local organizations or local agencies can deal with the appeal process without having to go through a judicial process. Now, eventually they may get to a judicial process, but for right now, that is not the case. Let's take a look at some of these different venues. There's DHS. They handle administrative appeals. There's the juvenile court, which you may or may not be involved in. And the ones that we deal with primarily are the juvenile court for child protection. There are two major divisions in the juvenile court law in Chapter 232 of the Code. One of them is for child protection, and one of them is where juveniles are committing offenses which would be considered criminal if they were adults. But because they are juveniles under the age of 18, we've relegated the handling of their cases to the juvenile court. Then there's something called the district court, and you may be in district court for several different reasons. You may be in district court for a criminal act. You may be in district court for divorce or for family court, or you may be in district court for some civil action where your neighbor's dog has dug up your turnips or something, and you think that you should be compensated for that. It would be a civil action. Then we go to the Supreme Court, which would be an appeal from the district court. And in the Supreme Court, that's where your papers are all filed initially, there are 7 justices who sit in on panels of the Supreme Court. And by the way, by the time you get to the Supreme Court, you're spending some real money for lawyers and for development of briefs and so forth. Supreme Court generally looks at the cases they wish to handle themselves, cases that are precedent cases or cases that are real difficult cases. All others then are handed over to the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals some time ago decided to expand its number of judges, but to make 3 panels of judges, so they can do 3 times as much work, or do their work in one third of the time, I should say. So we have 3 panels of 3 judges each, taking cases that the Supreme Court passes off to you. You want to go up to the next one?
Yeah, if they can, you said 3 panels, they can do it a lot faster. Why is our cases going slower and slower in the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court?
You've got a question there that I can't answer. I don't know why they go slow. Slow as all get out in some of these cases. One moment here. We're going to take a look at what some of these different areas are involved. DHS investigates and prepares an assessment. Now, that's when the social worker comes to your door, investigates, and then prepares an assessment report. They used to call it investigation. Now they call them assessments, but they're the same thing no matter what. DHS must notify the parent that an investigation is to commence. So you'll get two notifications. One's at the beginning and one is at the end. A parent must request a copy of the assessment. They're not going to automatically give you a copy of what they've done in your family. You have to step up and say, I want a copy of that. And you fill out a form, and they've got forms all over the place. And that form will grant you the privilege of having a copy of what they've done for your family. Okay.
Then you're saying parents must also request an evidentiary hearing within 6 months.
We're going to talk about that in a little more detail. We'll have Don show you the form that you can get on your internet service, and show you various ways to get to that form, and you can actually submit it, your form for your request. That evidentiary hearing must be filed within 6 months of of the ruling on your assessment. So once you get the assessment, you've got 6 months, but don't count on waiting until the last minute, because it's awfully easy to forget, and a lot more difficult to leap over the requirement, the 6 months requirement. So better that you be on time. And it is a absolute must that if that report is an improper or incorrect report, that you use every effort on that you exercise every effort on your part to appeal it, because it certainly does you no good to have a child abuse report written up on you. In some cases, if you're a nurse or licensed in some other area, it's possible that you could lose your license. It's possible they could take all kinds of action against you, and these are delightful things to have for a bitter spouse who wants to use this information against you in a divorce court.
If you're around children, you now become a target, and you could lose your job just because you have any connection with children.
So the secret word is, if you have an assessment against you, fight it if it's not correct. There's no reason why a good parent should have on record a child abuse report. Now, it may take some effort on your part. It isn't something that you can sleep on, that you can forget. They set deadlines, and we'd like to see you keep the deadlines, because it's difficult to explain sometimes why you took 7 months instead of 6 months when they said that it's a 6 month time limit on appealing these cases. Well, that's what happens in the administrative section. Okay.
Do they need an attorney to do this?
You need not an attorney. In fact, the statistics show that those who appeal their cases without an attorney do just as well as those who hire an attorney. That's not to say that an attorney wouldn't be handy if you've got unlimited resources. It's kind of nice to lean on someone to do all the thinking for you, but you do not have to have an attorney. A reasonable person can go through these things and lock in the various issues. And by the way, you have a right to, in your evidentiary hearing, to discuss every single issue. We had to take a case family all the way to the Supreme Court to test that out, but we found out that Supreme Court wants you to have access to every issue that's involved. So they can't deny you access to the person who accused you. You can cross-examine them if they're a part of that assessment report. Okay, hearing is the Iowa Department of Inspections and Appeals will set a hearing for you. An ALJ administrative law judge will be appointed. This may take a long time, because one time when we looked at the size of the line, there were 900 in front of you. They may find ways of speeding that up a little bit. They like to do their appeals by telephone, because then they don't have to have travel time in there. but your best bet is to have it eyeball to eyeball, right across the table, because there are a number of problems with telephone appeals, and you have the right to have an eyeball to eyeball evidentiary hearing. It's the first time and the last time that you're able to get data to the Department of Human Services or in resistance to the Department of Human Services accusations against you. So you want to do a good job, you want to do a thorough job, and I believe that your best bet is to do a job eyeball to eyeball, right across the table from the people that you're asking the questions of. Within 10 days of that proposed decision that the ALJ makes in the Department of Inspections and Appeals, you can take your decision to the director of the Department of Human Services, no longer Kevin Kincannon, but the director or sitting director, interim director, can look over the happenings of that proposed decision and can either affirm it or throw it out.
What happens if you miss the 10-day deadline?
If you miss the 10-day deadline, you're dead in the water. So, and you would have to explain, have a considerable explanation, you know, like personal death or something like that.
Then you have to appeal it to a higher court to hopefully turn them around.
Right. So better that you keep their silly little rules. The department doesn't have much in terms of mandatory scheduling that they have to stick to, but you do. They'll make sure that that you stay within certain deadlines. Okay, so you do that within 10 days of when you get your proposed decision on the on your assessment. Those decisions come out either the report is confirmed or it's unfounded. And there's one other category which they can call it founded but not registered, which means that if certain conditions are in place, they can write the report, find you guilty of the misdeed, whether it was putting a bruise on your child or spanking them and somebody saw a red mark. By the way, red marks do not require healing. A blush is a red mark, isn't it? But a blush doesn't require healing. It just the condition of the skin is temporarily colored red. So don't let them talk about red marks as if they were a serious injury. By the way, that's one thing that we need to straighten up in the law, is those kinds of definitions. What is a serious injury to a child? Well, they'll take anything for a serious injury if they can only get a founded report out of it. So the three different kinds of reports would be unfounded. That's the kind that you want from your assessment. You can get a founded report, unregistered, or you can get a confirmed report, which means it's going to go on the registry, and it's likely to stay there for a few years. Iowa Code Section 17A of the is a means by which you can get a review by the courts of everything that was done in the administrative process. So you need to, you can read 17A in just a few minutes and get an idea of what your rights under. It's a fairly well-written law, 17A. It's in the first book of the of a 5-volume set of Iowa code books. The Iowa Court of Appeals can then, if you don't like what you get from the judicial review, you can take your case to the Iowa Supreme Court, and that can take a long time. It's quite a bit of work to carry your case to the Iowa Supreme Court or to the finally to the Court of Appeals, but you probably should follow through. If that is an evil report that's written against you, you don't need that kind of a report. It can dismantle your family. It can affect your job. It can do all kinds of things that you probably would rather not happen. Don, you want to bring up that next topic here? We need to go down a little farther than that. Okay, that doesn't quite make it. We were going to let's see. Here's a website. You might want to write this down because this is where you can go in directly and get a form. Don will show you the form and he'll tell you a little bit more about things. What are you looking for?
Oh, I'm actually looking for the form.
Okay.
How could it disappear while we're on the set here?
Okay. This is a real long one, so maybe I better leave this up for just a little bit. Don't go. Okay. I should have one that's backed up. In fact, it may be up there. Okay. This is a. I'm going to leave this up here for a little bit. It's https // DHS secure .dhs .state .ia .us / forms appeal request .html. Now, it might be a little simpler for you to simply go into Google, and in Google you'll find if you put in Iowa DHS, you'll find, is that the form you're looking for?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You'll find when you go to Iowa DHS into Google, it'll give you an idea of, it'll lead you to the home site for DHS. You click under Appeals, and then under Appeals you click under Forms. And Don's going to tell you a little bit about the form that you should use for an evidentiary hearing. This is kind of a generic form. It works for all kinds of appeals. But Don, tell us a little bit about this form and how you would fill it out. We'll only have a few minutes to explain this.
Okay, John. As you see up at the top here, you put in your name, last name, first name, your mailing address. Come over here. When it pertains to a child abuse report like we're talking about, you won't find anything up here, so you check other. And you continue on down here and put your address in and phone number in here. This here, I want my benefits to continue. That really doesn't apply to you. They are talking about food stamps there. Do you need an interpreter? Well, there could be some people that are listening to us that need an interpreter. So by law, they have to provide you one. Here's one. I want a pre-hearing conference. I strongly recommend you put yes in there so that partly it's a learning experience for you prior to the hearings, that you're keeping up on everything, and also making sure you are that the DHS is doing their job prior to you going into court, because you have a right to information pertaining to this abuse report, and they may not have given you that. So you need a pre-hearing, bring that to the attention of the judge, and at that time the judge hopefully would order the DHS to provide you the information. And down here, this box here, you put in there the reason why you're appealing pertaining to the abuse report. Now, you don't have to make that very complicated at all. Basically, when you send this form in with your name and address, that gives you the appeal. So don't make it too complicated here. And when you actually get into court, that's when you present everything to the judge. And you sign your name and date it here. And down below, Yeah, this probably won't apply to you unless you pay for an attorney to handle the case for you. If you want somebody to help you with your appeal, you put their name down there. But you're not going to get it's a very slim chance, I believe, you're going to get a friend or a minister or anybody else to sit beside you, because they've got that all tied up. They'll send in the assistant attorney general, who does this on a daily or weekly basis, comes into these kind of hearings all the time. They know just how to talk to the judge, and a new parent comes in there on appeal. They have no idea what to say, and you can't even bring a friend in to encourage you. It's not fair, but that's the way it is, John.
Okay.
Also, this comes down online, and you can just press the button, and it'll go right to the DHS, so that you'll have your appeal online. And then I suggest you follow up by a phone call shortly after, within a few days after you send it online. Okay, John?
Okay. There's a little bit of work involved here, but if you get that online form, remember I said you could Google it by putting in Iowa and DHS. That'll bring up homepage for DHS, and then you click on appeals and click on forms. And you may have to spin down a little bit before you find this particular form, but you'll find the form, and it's the kind of form that you can transmit. So it's important that you look into resisting a bad report against you. A bad report doesn't help your family stay together.
It'll haunt you the rest of your life if you don't fight it.
Yeah, so be sure to take our recommendation and fight every one of those reports that is an incorrect report. If enough people fight those incorrect reports, it may discourage them from writing incorrect reports.
Of course, we're talking to the innocent people, or also DHS is breaking the laws as they go along. So parents, you need to resist when there's laws broken.
Okay, I'm going to leave that up there for just a little bit, and then you can put this card up in a moment. This will give you a direct in to that website where you can get your form. Get the form filled out, and we'll be back another time to tell you a little more about how to structure your interview, how to structure your arguments with the Department of Human Services. You want to put up that card, and these are numbers that you may want to get a hold of. Now, we're not attorneys, so we're not going to practice law before the bar. We're going to give you a few hints about how to handle your case and how to deal with social workers. You don't have to be angry with them. You don't have to raise your voice to them. You don't have to be discourteous to them. Treat them right, even though they may not always treat you right. We'll see you next week.